Vandeham Shri Guru Shira Parakamlam Shri Gurun Vaishnavam Sya Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sagana Raghunatam Pitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Paran Sahagana Lalita Shivashikam Vitam Sya Om Adhyana Timarandasya Gyanashana Shalakya Shakshoram Milidam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah Gurva Bhishtam Supurkam Gurganara Sesha Sambhushitam Chinja Samasta Veda Nipunam Shri Rupa Patanagam Govindam Vidam Uchalam Bharatanam Bhaktiyan Vidam Sundaram Mande Vishwa Gurun Shah Divyat Bhagavat Premna Vibija Pranam Devam Divyatanam Suchanavananam Balarka Chelanchitam Sundrananda Puram Sadeka Varanam Vairagya Vidyamburim Sri Siddhanta Nidim Subhakti Lasitam Saraswatanam Varam Vandetam Shivaram Mareka Sharanam Yashishwara Sridharam Manshikopatarubhyasya Kripa Sindhubhyevacha Patitanam Pavanibhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namah Namo Mahabharanyaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namane Gauratavishe Namah. We're listening to the Srimad Bhagavad Gita, the hidden treasure of the sweet absolute, with translation and commentary by Srila Bhakti Rakshak Sridhar Dev-Goswami Maharaj, translation into English by Sri Swarupananda Prabhu. And this is Chapter 6, Dhyana-yoga, the path of meditation. Sri Bhagavanu Vacha Anashrita Karma Phalam Karyam Karma Karotiya Sasanyasi Cha Yogi Cha Nanyaragnir Na Chakriya. The Supreme Lord said, no genuine sannyasi and yogi is one who, without expectation of the fruits of his actions, performs his duties as prescribed by the scriptures. One is not a sannyasi merely by renouncing the performance of the fire sacrifice and other prescribed duties, and one is not a yogi merely by becoming physically inactive. The Supreme Lord said, no, a genuine sannyasi and yogi is one who, without expectation of the fruits of his actions, performs his duties as prescribed by the scriptures. One is not a sannyasi merely by renouncing the performance of the fire sacrifice and other prescribed duties, and one is not a yogi merely by becoming physically inactive. So here, Krishna's rejecting the idea of what we might call karma sannyas, that just giving up all work and thinking that one has obtained a purified position. But just renouncing activities does not lead to purification, and that doesn't make one a true sannyasi or renunciate. And also, one doesn't become a yogi by just becoming inactive. There's no purification involved in inactivity. Just by, if you're not in a purified state and you try to renounce everything, that will not lead to any success, either in the realization of one's duties as a sannyasi or as a yogi. So we see there are some persons who believe that just by stopping all activities, they'll sit in one place, they'll let their hair grow, their fingernails grow, and just stop doing everything, and they think they have attained some kind of spiritual beatitude. But that it's not really, this is not the proper path of yoga. And Krishna says that. Yam sannyasam iti prahur yogam tam vidi pandava na'i asanyasta sankalpo yogi bhavati kaschana. O Arjuna, that which is known as sannyas, complete renunciation, you should know to be yoga, since without renouncing fruitive desire, no one can be a yogi. So no one can actually engage in yoga without giving up desire for the fruits of one's activities, or giving up the sense of being an enjoyer. And there, otherwise, one is not properly situated in yoga as long as one renounces, one doesn't give up the desire for enjoyment. Some persons believe that they can engage in yoga just by performing some physical exercises. We call that hatha yoga. And some persons believe that they can engage in meditation or Dhyana-yoga just by trying to temporarily rid the mind of all activities and sitting in a position and without talking, without moving. But that is not yoga. That's just what goes, which may be advertised as yoga. But first thing about yoga is that one has to give up the enjoying sentiment. Since without renouncing fruit of desire, no one can be a yogi. Arur rukshor muner yogam karma karanam uchate yoga rudasya tashyaiva shama karanam uchate. For the yoga practitioner desirous of attaining steady yoga meditation, action is said to be the means. When he has achieved yoga meditation, renunciation of all action is said to be the means of remaining in meditation. For the yoga practitioner desirous of attaining steady yoga meditation, action is said to be the means. When he has achieved yoga meditation, renunciation of all action is said to be the means of remaining in meditation. So first of all, to begin engaging in yoga meditation, here Krishna says, action is to be the means. So you have to perform those activities which will lead to the successful practicing of yoga. Without doing that, how will you possibly be engaged in yoga? Then, when one has achieved meditation, yoga meditation, then the mind is no longer engaged in mental activities. That is, the unsteady mind cannot be of any use for a yoga practitioner. Yada inendriyarteshu na karmas manushajate sarva sankalpa sannyasi yoga rudas tatochate. Yada inendriyarteshu na karmas manushajate sarva sankalpa sannyasi yoga rudas tatochate. When the yoga practitioner does not become attached to the objects of the senses and to any action in pursuit of their enjoyment, and renounces all thoughts of enjoyment, then he is said to have attained to yoga. When the yoga practitioner does not become attached to the objects of the senses and to any action in pursuit of their enjoyment, and renounces all thoughts of enjoyment, then he is said to have attained to yoga. So again, one cannot engage in yoga as while one is in an enjoying mood. And when one is in one's mind, rather than meditating on the Lord, which will be the successful practice of meditation, one is meditating or one is thinking of all the different activities that one needs to engage in order to continue enjoying. So people use their mind to pursue how they can accomplish their desires for enjoyment. And even while they're in so-called meditation, their mind will be fleeting from one object to another, thinking of how they can enjoy one thought to another. But that, obviously, that can never be a successful practice of yoga, and that kind of meditation is of no value. Udared atmanatmanam natmanam vasadayet Atmaiva I Atmano Bandur Atmaiva Ripur Atmana Udared Atmanatmanam Natmanam Vasarayet Atmaiva I Atmano Bandur Atmaiva Ripur Atmana. One must elevate oneself by the mind, not degrade oneself by the mind. For the mind is sometimes the friend of the living being, and in another situation that very mind is his enemy. One must elevate oneself by the mind, not degrade oneself by the mind, for the mind is sometimes the friend of the living being, and in another situation that very mind is one's enemy. So the mind can be either the best friend or the greatest enemy. Obviously, when the mind is uncontrolled, the mind will then be engaging the senses and attaining the objects of those senses, and that will be, one will be in pursuit of so many goals for enjoyment. And that kind of mind is of not any use for us. Then we will say the mind in that case is the enemy. And when the mind is controlling the senses, and when the mind is directed by intelligence, which is higher than the mind, then one can be properly engaged in meditation. So Srila Maharaj gave one example. He said that there is a situation where a minor comes into possession of an inheritance, but because that minor is not of a proper age to be able to properly administrate the inheritance or properly utilize the inheritance, because being too young, then some administrators are appointed for that minor to hold and utilize that inheritance until that person is of a sufficient age in order to properly utilize it. But instead of doing that, the administrators that are appointed, which in this case are the mind, intelligence, they are not properly administrating the inheritance, but they're rather spending the whole inheritance. And if any question comes up, they say, oh, we are just acting on behalf of this minor who is not of age to properly utilize his inheritance. And Srila Maharaj said that is the situation that we are all minor souls. And we have come into an inheritance which we can properly utilize if we develop the maturity and the advancement in spiritual practice to be able to understand our position as a servant of the Supreme Lord. But in the meantime, some administrators have been appointed to properly take care of that inheritance, and they are the mind and the intelligence. But instead of properly administrating the inheritance, they're spending everything. And then if any question arises, they say, we are just doing this on behalf of this minor person, actually the minor soul. We're taking care of the inheritance and everything is for him. But no, everything is not for the minor. Everything is being usurped and spent by these two bad administrators, the mind and intelligence. So Srila Maharaj then said, what is the way to correct this situation? He says, only when a major soul will properly take control of the administration will everything be properly utilized and nothing will be squandered recklessly. So that major soul is a realized spiritual master who can direct the minor soul in properly understanding that everything is by Krishna and everything is for Krishna. Everything is by him and everything is for him, and properly direct us in all have some inheritance. We've got this human body, and we've got an opportunity to engage in devotional service. So when we make contact with a major soul, then we can find out how to properly do things. Otherwise, if we rely on our mind especially, here it says in the Bhagavad Gita, the mind can be the best friend or the worst enemy. But obviously for one who is entrapped within this samsara, this material repetition, birth and death, and going in this cycle, then obviously in that situation, the mind will not be one's best friend. The mind will always try to engage us in enjoying this body and our resources. So, for one who has conquered the mind is his friend. For one unable to control the mind, his mind works against him like an enemy. Jitat mana prasant tasya param atma samahita shitoshna sukadukeshu tata mana pamanayo. The yogi who has conquered the mind remains deeply absorbed in yogic trance, peaceful and undisturbed by cold and heat, happiness and unhappiness, or honor and dishonor. The yogi who has conquered the mind remains deeply absorbed in yogic trance, peaceful and undisturbed by cold and heat, happiness and unhappiness, or honor and dishonor. So when we are proceeding, we're always confronted by so many dualities: heat and cold, pleasure and pain, happiness and distress. So many, and this whole world consists of so many dualities. That's the nature of the material world. And as long as we are going to be disturbed by those dualities and entrapped, always thinking of how we can control these dualities, then we will not be, we will not become peaceful, and we will not actually be engaged in spiritual life. So, like in the song, it says, Sita atapa pata varishana edina yamani jagire kamala dala chala jivana talamala bhajam hariparanitire. What is it? Sita atapa pata varishana edina yamani jagire bifali sevinu kripana durajana chapala sukala labire. And Sita atapa, in heat and cold, Sita atapa bata varishana. Whatever the situation, Sita atapa bata varishana, iteki Sita atapa bata varishana, iteki achi parati tire. Kamala dalad, no, it's bifali sevinu, kripada durajana, chapala sukala labire. This is my goal. In material life, chapala sukha. I'm always engaged in looking for some temporary happiness, which is very fleeting, doesn't stay. The whole material situation is temporary, and I'm trying so hard. Kripana durajana. I'm working hard to satisfy kripanas, those who have no interest in me or my spiritual life or anything. They're just interested in exploiting me for their own benefit. So, Sita atapa bata varishana yedina yamini jagire bifali sevinu kripana durajana chapala sukaluvai lagire. And I submit myself to that situation, because I'm always looking for some flickering happiness. And in that way, I'm confronted with so many dualities. How will I be successful when at every moment I'm faced with so many dualities? One minute I'm happy, one minute I'm sad, one minute I'm in pain, one minute I'm happy, I'm pleased. Like that. peace, no possibility of happiness. See? Let's see. Jnana Vijnana Triptatma Kutashto Vijyatendriya Yukta I Uchate Yogi Samalostrashma Kanchana. When it was always satisfied within by both knowledge and realization, who is always fixed in his spiritual nature, who is sense-controlled, and who has the vision of equality, for a clod of earth, a rock, or gold, it is said that such a person has attained yoga. One who is always satisfied within by both knowledge and realization, who is always fixed in his spiritual nature, who is sense-controlled, and who has the vision of equality, for a clod of earth, a rock, or gold, it is said that such a person has attained yoga. And what is the idea? That one cannot appreciate if given some gold or some resources to be able to use in the service of the Lord? Is that what it's saying? That one will see that as equal to a rock or a clod of earth? No, that's not what's being said. One is not thinking of anything apart from the service of the Lord. Everything will be utilized in the service of the Lord. If something has a particular utility, then one can utilize that in the service of the Lord. Otherwise, one is not interested in material gain just for one's own enjoyment. One is not seeing everything in the terms of exploitation. So that's what this means. One who is always satisfied within by both knowledge and realization, who is always fixed in his spiritual nature, who is sense-controlled, and who has the vision of equality, for a clod of earth, a rock, or gold, it is said that such a person has attained yoga. He's saying, trying to see everything to be utilized in the service of the Lord. And if it has some utility in that way, then that's very good. Otherwise, he's not attached to attaining. He's attaining what can be used for his own exploitation or enjoyment. Surin mitrari udasina madhyastan veshabandushu sadush vapi cha papeshu samabhulir visishyate. Such an eminent yogi has a vision of equality towards a well-wisher, a friend, an enemy, an indifferent person, a mediator, a hateful person, a relative, a saint, and a sinner. Such an eminent yogi has a vision of equality towards a well-wisher, a friend, an enemy, an indifferent person, a mediator, a hateful person, a relative, a saint, and a sinner. Well, obviously for the Lord is not making considerations that someone is the Lord's friend and someone is the Lord's enemy. The Lord doesn't think in that way, even though the Lord will accept the service of the devotee and show love and affection for his devotee, just as in the case of, for instance, Nrsingadev or Prahlad Maharaj. But Prahlad Maharaj, being the excellent devotee, when the sons of Shukracharya, Shanda and Amarka, they put Prahlad Maharaj in a Gurukul and tried to teach Prahlad Maharaj politics and how to be, so that he could become a king. Then Prahlad Maharaj said, I cannot accept your conception because it is based on the idea of friend and enemy. And he said, since I see everyone as being an eternal soul and a servant of the Lord, I cannot accept the distinction between friends and enemies. So that is the vision of a true realized person. Prahlad Maharaj was very young, but he had that divine vision. Why? Because he's understanding things in terms of his relationship with the Lord. Such an eminent yogi has a vision of equality towards a well-wisher, a friend, an enemy, an indifferent person, a mediator, a hateful person, a relative, a saint, and a sinner. Even Prahlad's father was very ill-intentioned and wanted to kill his son, but Prahlad Maharaj didn't think of his father as an enemy. Rather, he tried to help his father, even though his father was trying to hurt him. That when his father was asked, what is the best thing that you have learned from your teachers, he said, Shravanam Kirtanam Vishnu Smaranam Pada Sevanam Vandanam Archanam Dashyam Sakyam Atmanivedanam. He said these things to the importance of hearing from a genuine teacher or our spiritual source, Shravanam Kirtanam, and to be able to chant and speak Krishna Katha, to be able to chant the whole name, Shravanam Kirtanam, now Archanam, Vandanam Archanam, Vandanam, to be able to worship and offer prayers, Archanam, to be able to offer to the Lord, like we're doing in Arti, Vandanam, Archanam, Dashyam, becoming a servant of the Lord, Sakyam, becoming a friend of the Lord, Shravanam Kirtanam Vishnu Smaranam, Vishnu Smaranam. We're reading the path of meditation. So Smaranam, remembering the Lord, that is actually, we could say, proper meditation. Shravanam Kirtanam Vishnu Smaranam, Padasevanam, serving the Lord's lotus feet. Archanam, worshiping the Lord. Vandanam, offering prayers to the Lord. Archanam, Vandanam. Dashyam, becoming a servant of the Lord. Sakyam, becoming the Lord's, thinking of the Lord as one's best friend. Archanam, Dashyam, Sakyam, Atmanivedanam, and utilizing everything, one's mind, intelligence, senses, all in the service of the Lord. This Prahlad Maharaj tried to help his father. He told him, these are actually a benefit for you. And then he told his father, when he saw how his father was acting, Prahlad Maharaj also told his father, my dear father, you are too materially attached. You should go into the forest and engage yourself in vanaprastha, and giving up all your attachments and engage in the service of the Lord. So that Prahlad Maharaj wasn't trying to get his father angry, but that was the result. But he was trying to help his father. His father asked him, what's the best thing you learned? He said, he spoke this way. Yogi yunjita sadatam atmanam rahasi stita ekaki yata chitatma nirashir aparigraha. The yogi should constantly concentrate his mind by remaining alone in a solitary place, his mind and body controlled, free from desire and acquisition. The yogi should constantly concentrate his mind by remaining alone in a solitary place, his mind and body controlled, free from the desire and acquisition. So chanting of the holy name. If one can be in the association of devotees, one can chant in kirtan, chant the holy name. But if there's no one qualified around, the devotee can be by oneself and chant the holy name to himself. This is called japa. In any case, he can engage like that. And real silence doesn't mean not to speak. It means not to speak anything mundane. But one can engage in chanting. The yogi should constantly concentrate his mind by remaining alone in a solitary place. His mind and body controlled, free from desire and acquisition. Sucho deshe pratishtapya stiram asanam atmana nati uchrin itam nati nicham chela jina kushotaram Shucho deshe pratishtapya stiram asanam atmana nati uchritam nati nityam Shelabjina kushotaram tatraikagram manakritva yata chitendriya kriya upavishyasane yunjad yogam atma vishudaye. In a clean place, not too high and not too low, the yogi should establish a firm seat of kusha grass, deerskin and cloth, and sitting on that seat, subjugating all mental and sensual activity with one pointed concentration. He should practice meditational trance in order to purify his heart. In a clean place, not too high and not too low, the yogi should establish a firm seat of kusha grass, deerskin and cloth. Then sitting on that seat, subjugating all mental and sensual activity with one pointed concentration, that he should practice meditational trance in order to purify his heart. So when one is engaged in devotional service here, we're not so much concerned about external things like kusha grass and deerskin and cloth. When Ramananda Bharati, I believe when Ramananda came before Mahaprabhu, he was wearing a deerskin, and he had Mahaprabhu had appreciation for Ramananda, but when he saw that he was in a deerskin, he said, "Where's Ramananda?" And his servant Govinda said, "Here he is in front of you." He said, "No, you must be mistaken. This cannot be Ramananda, my spiritual master, because why would he be wearing a deerskin?" And then Ramananda thought, "Oh, he has spoken correctly. I just put on this deerskin for prestige." So we are not, and we see when Mahaprabhu approached Mrigari to get him to stop hunting for animals, and then Mrigari offered him some skin. You can have a tiger skin or a deer skin. And Narada Muni was completely uninterested. "Oh, I'm not interested in that. I just have a request from you. Why do you try to cause pain to the animals?" And that. So we're not so much concerned with the, we can say, the external aspects of deerskin, kusha grass. This was for another kind of practice of external practice of yoga. People in previous ages engaging in meditation. But rather, for us, our meditation is on the service of the Lord, trying to engage in these practices that I mentioned, hearing and chanting and serving the Lord's lotus feet. And we're taking direction in the association of devotees. And we can either engage chanting silently in our own mind, or we can engage chanting loudly like Haridasa. Samam kaya chiro grivam darayan achalam stira sampraksha nasikagram svam dishas chana vlokayan prashantatma vigatabir brahmachari pratestita manasamyamya machito yukta asita matpara samam kaya shiro grivam darayan achalam stira sampraksha nasikagram swam dishas chana valokaya Prashantatma Vigatakbir Ramachari Vratestita Manasamyamya Machchito Yukta Asita Matpara. Soberly keeping his body, head, and neck straight and upright, poised. The yogi should fix his gaze at one point, as though between the eyes, without casting a glance in any direction, tranquil, fearless, and reposed in the vow of celibacy. He should meditate on me as four-armed Vishnu, and devoting himself to me, he should thus practice yoga. Soberly keeping his mind, head, and neck straight and upright, poised, the yogi should fix his gaze at one point, as though between the eyes, without casting a glance in any direction, tranquil, fearless, reposed in the vow of celibacy. He should meditate on me as four-armed Vishnu, and devoting himself to me, he should thus practice yoga. So here we see there is actually these are the requirements for yoga, to be engaged in achieving some concentration and meditation on the Lord, and not just trying to relax the body or attain some state of trance or sleep. That's not yoga. So many persons, they don't have any understanding what is yoga, but here we see, this is Krishna's description, that one can come to the point of yoga by controlling it, by being completely fixed on, what is the word, where one is, one has all one's senses fixed on the service of the Lord, and not going from any side to other. That will be proper yoga. Not that one is wavering and one losing one's concentration. The proper yogi is very controlled. No one is practicing that kind of yoga. But that yoga will mean to Vijitendriya. All the senses and mind, everything will be concentrated on the service of the Lord. And here, and one is engaged in brahmacharya, here it's mentioned, as though, tranquil, fearless, and reposed in the vow of celibacy. Then that person, man or woman, will be engaged in celibacy, yoga. They'll be engaged in control of all the senses, and this is the yoga mentioned here by Krishna. We do not see anyone who can really practice that kind of yoga, to just engage oneself in being pinpoint in concentration. Yujhan evam sadatmanam yogi niyata manasa shantim nirvana paramam matsam stam adhigacchati. Yujhan evam sadatmanam yogi niyata manasa shantim nirvana paramam matsam stam adhigacchati. In this way, constantly absorbing his mind in meditation, Dhyana-yoga, the yogi who has ceased hankering for material enjoyment achieves the peace of liberation from mundanity, the peace which abides in me and my Brahman effulgence. In this way, constantly absorbing his mind in meditation, Dhyana-yoga, the yogi who has ceased hankering for material enjoyment achieves the peace of liberation from mundanity, the peace which abides in me and my Brahman effulgence. So, at least that person has come to the preliminary stages of spiritual practice. That is, here we find a description of one who is an impersonalist, who is interested in attaining the effulgence of the Lord in attaining liberation. This is not the goal of the devotees. Sarvabhauma Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, he was previously an impersonalist, and he saw everything in terms of impersonalism, in this kind of impersonal realization and interest in liberation. And he was always trying to instruct Mahaprabhu in impersonalism as taught by Shankaracharya. But Mahaprabhu didn't accept that, and he helped Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya understand the scriptures in terms of devotional service. That we're not Brahman, but Parabrahman. The understanding of the Lord. And when Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya was enlightened by Mahaprabhu, then he could not even tolerate the word for liberation. No. He was not interested in mukti. When in the scriptures, in the Srimad Bhagavatam, he saw the Lord referred to as mukti-pod. He wanted to actually change the Srimad Bhagavatam to say, instead of mukti-pod, bhakti-pod. But Mahaprabhu said, no, it is not necessary to change that, because I can understand by the word bhakti-pod, that I can understand by the word mukti-pod, that it is a reference to Krishna, it is a reference to the Lord. And Sarvabhauma said, okay, I can accept that, because I could not get that kind of a reading, but now that you are talking in this way, I can understand. But still, I do not like the sound of the word moksha or mukti. Previously, that he considered that was the goal. But later he understood that is just entering, that the effulgence, Brahman effulgence is what? It is just the effulgence coming from the divine body of the Lord. That is the Brahman. Udanti tat tattva vidas tattvam yajjanamadvayam brahmati paramatmiti bhagavaniti shabdite. The Lord can be known in three ways: as Brahman by the impersonalists, as Paramatma by the yogis, and as Bhagavan, as Swayam Bhagavan, the Supreme Lord, known in that way by the devotees. So, and then I'll read one more verse here. Nati ashnatas tu yogosti na chaikantyam anashnata na chati swapna shilasya jagrato naiva charjuna nati ashnatas tu yogosti na chaikantam anashnata na chati swapna shilasya jagrato naiva charjuna. Or Arjuna, yoga cannot be practiced by one who overeats, undereats, oversleeps, or undersleeps. O Arjuna, yoga cannot be practiced by one who overeats, undereats, oversleeps, or undersleeps. Cannot be practiced by one who doesn't have control of one's senses. But the senses, the Lord is Rishikesha. He is all the senses are to be engaged in the service of the Lord. He's the controller of the senses. So, O Arjuna, yoga cannot be practiced by the one who overeats, undereats, oversleeps, or undersleeps. Okay. So I'm going to stop here. We'll chant Hari Haraya. Hari Haraya Nama Krishna Jaravaya Nama. Hari Haraya Nama Krishna Jaravaya Nama. Jaravaya Maravaya Keshavaya Nama. Jaravaya Maravaya Keshavaya Nama. Gopal Govindaram Sri Madhusudan. Gopal Govindaram Sri Madhusudan. Giridhari Gopinatha Marana Mohan. Giridhari Gopinatha Janardan Shiva Sari Gora Bhakta Vrinda. Janardan Shiva Sari Gora Bhakta Vrinda. Jarupa Sanatam Bhakta Raguna. Jarupa Sanatam Bhakta Raguna. Shri Jiva Gopala Bhakta Dasa Raguna. Shri Jiva Gopala Bhakta Dasa Raguna. Echai Gosai Kori Charana Vadan. Echai Gosai Kori Charana Vadan. Yahweh Vignana Shamista Puran. Yahweh Vignana Shamista Puran. Echai Gosai Jarmui Taradas. Echai Gosai Jarmui Taradas. Dasamara Pada Renu Mora Panchagras. Dasamara Pada Renu Mora Panchagras. Sadhe Charana Sevi Bhakta Sanivas. Sadhe Charana Sevi Bhakta Sanivas. Janame Janame More Abhilas. Janame Janame More Abhilas. Echai Gosai Jabe Bhaje Koilavas. Echai Gosai Jabe Bhaje Koilavas. Radha Krishna Nitya Leela Korila Prakash. Radha Krishna Nitya Leela Korila Prakash. Anande Bolo Hari Bhaja Vrindavan. Anande Bolo Hari Bhaja Vrindavan. Shri Guru Vaishnava Pade Manjayaman. Shri Guru Vaishnava Pade Manjayaman. Shri Guru Vaishnava Padma Goriyan. Shri Guru Vaishnava Padma Goriyan. Harinam Sankirtana Kohe Naratamuna. Harinam Sankirtana Kohe Naratamuna. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Nitai Gora Hari Bo, Hari Bo, Hari Bo, Hari Bo. Nitai Gora Hari Bo, Hari Bo, Hari Bo, Hari Bo. Nitai Gora Hari Bo, Hari Bo, Hari Bo, Hari Bo. Nitai Gora Hari Bo, Hari Bo, Hari Bo, Hari Bo. Jai Saparikara Shishi Guru Guranga Gandharvika Giridhari Ki Jai. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramasa Paravajaka Charyasta Tara Sadashi Shrimad Srila Bhakti Sundar Govinda Dev Goswami Maharaj ki jai. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Parabhajakacharya Ashtatara Sadashi Srimad Srila Bhakti Rakshak Srila Dev-Goswami Maharaj ki jai. Jai Bhagavan Srila Bhakti Sananda Saraswati Goswami Thakur ki jai. Jai Om Vishnupad Srila Gaur Kishore Das Babaji Maharaj ki jai. Jai Om Vishnupad Srila Satchidananda Bhakti Vinod Thakur ki jai. Jai Om Vishnupad Vaishnava Sarvabhauma Srila Jagannath Das Babaji Maharaj ki jai. Rupanuga Guru Varga ki jai. Namachar Srila Haridas Thakur ki jai. Shri Rupa Sanatana Bhatta Raganashi Chiva Gopal Bhadadas Raganasha Goswami Prabhu ki jai. Premsi Gosha Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Shri Gaura Bhakta Vrinda ki jai. Vishvabharinya Srila Bhakti Vedanta Swami Maharaj Prabhupada ki jai. Jai Om Vishnupad Srila Bhakti Nirmal Acharya Maharaj ki jai. Shri Chaitanya Saraswat Madhacharya Vrinda ki jai. Ananda Koti Vaishnava Vrinda ki jai. Shri Navadip Dham ki jai. Shri Mayapur ki jai. Saparshada Shri Nityananda Prabhu ki jai. Saparshada Shriman Mahaprabhu ki jai. Shri Kuladvip ki jai. Shri Chaitanya Saraswat Mat ki jai. Soquel Shri Chaitanya Saraswat Seva Ashram ki jai. Ganga Devi ki jai. Tulasi Maharani ki jai. Bhakti Devi ki jai. Shri Vrindavan Dham ki jai. Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopi Govardhan Sham Kunarada Kunda Kalindi Yamuna Jo ki jai. Samaveda Bhakta Vrinda ki jai. Shri Harinam Sankirtan ki jai. Shri Kartik Vrata ki jai. Shri Damodar Vrata ki jai. Shri Niyama Seva ki jai. Shri Urja Vrata ki jai. All the assembled devotees ki jai. Gaur Premanande Hari Hari Bol.
Srila Bhakti Pavan Janardan Maharaj ki jai.